Germany's Angela Merkel, France's Nicolas Sarkozy are going to be meeting this weekend. They are continuing to call for a, quote, comprehensive and ambitious package of measures to resolve the debt crisis. Jan Randolph is with us now. He is the director of sovereign risk, and that is for IHS Global Insight. He is with me from London. Jan, great to have your perspective on these headlines. We saw the markets, the U.S. equity market, selling off prior to this announcement that Sarkozy and Merkel would be meeting this weekend. And then also we have this headline that EU leaders have a summit next week, very latest on Wednesday. What can possibly come from the talks this weekend? What can possibly come from the EU summit next week?
Well, the French and the Germans, there are still important cross tensions to resolve. One is over Greece. The Germans are eyeing for a deeper haircut by the private sector. Then there's the recapitalization issue. And then finally, the bailout fund, the EFSF, and whether and if they should leverage that up. There's important disagreements between France and Germany. They've got to resolve them.
So, Jan, I mean, just to attack one by one, I mean, the EFSF, Germany probably just doesn't want to pay more. That is to say that Merkel might be afraid to put that vote out, right?
Well, yes. I mean, the EFSF, remember, half of it is effectively funded by German taxpayers. It's fiscally supported. And it's what the Germans have decided is the vehicle to use rather than the central bank. Most countries would have used a central bank by now, but the Germans want to keep it away from the fiscal position. That's their tradition. But everyone's been saying there's not enough money here. Even with the new flexible powers, contingency lines of credit can be used to bank recapitalization as a last resort. People are saying, it's got to be beefed up one way or another. The French want to turn
I mean, I've even heard up to 5 times where it stands now, something like €2 trillion is the right amount.
Yeah, there's a lot of plans out there. I mean, the French want to turn it into a bank that can issue bonds, and the bonds will be bought by the ECB. That is the classic Anglo-Saxon solution. That's what happens in the US and in the UK. But it's anathema to the Germans. Their tradition is to keep the central bank completely separate from government and fiscal. And they want the same setup for the Eurozone. The trouble is, they don't have that luxury option anymore, I don't think. Not when they have to deal with, when the central bank has to deal with the Eurozone economy and not a West German economy. So the Germans are going to have to compromise at some point. They've got to somehow compromise, leverage this thing up, even use the ECB as a backstop of last resort if the EFSF gets overheated or is under tremendous pressure.
So on whether it is 1.3 trillion, I mean, first of all, would that be enough? And then second of all, where is that money going to come from?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think what's happening is they're combining the EFSF, which is a temporary fund based on an emergency clause in the EU treaty, with the ESM fund, and combining the two to double the firepower effectively, or more than double it. I think really it's a question of what they're going to do with the money, how they're going to make it effective. For example, stabilising the banks and stabilising some of the sovereigns. I really think the key agent here should be the ECB. It should be using the two funds as firepower to stabilise the sovereign debt markets and also as a source of recapitalisation. Now, the trick is to deal with both the peripheral sovereign debt markets to make them attractive or more attractive, and at the same time stabilise or recapitalise those banks that need recapitalisation. It may work. It's a step in the right direction. I think market expectations are too sky high at the moment, particularly with the German position, where they're moving cautiously, step by step.
Well, yeah, Jan, you said earlier that the Germans do need to compromise. I just want to highlight here that the Greek parliament has just begun voting, and we did bring our viewers a report live from Athens talking about how this time around it's become even closer to Greek citizens in the sense that a few tens of thousands worth of state employees will be laid off if these austerity measures are going through. And of course, we've seen in the past 48 hours rioting in the streets of Athens. So, Jan, if I had to put a likelihood to you a likelihood that a solution, a little bit more detail, will be released this weekend, will be released towards the end of next week? Because we've been talking a lot about France, we've been talking a lot about Germany. In some ways, it's the mom and dad of Europe, but there are plenty of other countries who have voiced resistance to making this EFSF larger. I mean, I'm thinking of Finland, I'm thinking of the Netherlands. It's not just about France and Germany, even though arguably they have the most weight.
Yeah, I mean, well, Germany heads up the net creditor bloc. It is financially and economically the strongest, but there are others in similar position, like Holland and Austria and Luxembourg, and they basically see the same way as the Germans do. Then we have the French, more of a midway situation, and most vulnerable AAA sovereign in that group because of its banks' heavy exposure, more than proportionate heavy exposure to Greece and others of the Eurozone countries. I think we will see a few steps in the right direction, but it will not meet current market sky-high expectations. We'll have to see what actually comes out of these summits. There's a lot of speculation out there at the moment, but we can expect a few steps in the right direction, but nothing. There will not be an overnight magic resolution to this. All we can expect is steps in the right direction.
All right, well, improvement is better than nothing, Jan. Thanks as always. Jan Randolph joining us there from IHS Global Insight in London.